Almost ready, folks. Just managed to destroy my headphones. That's the reason for the delay, so I apologize. We all seem to be okay at the moment, though. Can everybody hear me? I know you can't see me yet. You will in a minute. Letting out the gas first. No, I've already done that bit. That was my squeaky chair. Yeah, camera will be coming on in just a second. Good, you guys can hear me. Excellent. 1 second. All right, prepare yourselves for my ugly mug. Alrighty, folks. Good evening. How are we doing? Hope everybody's doing well. It's been a little while since I've done a stream. I do apologize. I've had a lot on at the moment. I've had a lot of work on, a lot of mixing work, a lot of mastering work, and an absolute ton of session work. Yes, here I am. I'm here. Yes. Yes, I've been doing a ton of session work. I've spent the day hopping between 2 different studios today, which is always good fun. And consequently, I have a lovely blister on my finger from lots of bass playing. It's funny, isn't it? You know, you spend, as a bass player, professional bass player, you spend all your time building up these lovely calluses so you don't get blisters. And then you go and scald your fingers, you get a blister, and then you have to play through it. And I have to start all over again. Anyone famous? No. Local folks. But yeah, lots of fun. Very, very busy, very long day today. So I started at about 8 o'clock this morning. And I've been back in the house since about 9 o'clock. So I've been home for about 3 hours. And realized that I'd kind of left the place in an absolute state when I left. So my wife and kids are through in Glasgow for the night with my mother-in-law and my stepfather-in-law. So they're having a really good time without me. And I have the house to myself. Yay! So I can talk to you folks. So yeah, we can basically go for as long as we want, really. Normally I limit these things to about an hour, but tonight, well, we'll go for as long as we keep, we can until we get bored. So house party at mine, says Peter. Yeah, absolutely. House party right here in the sunny southeast of Edinburgh in Scotland. I have my favorite tea mug. I'm on the hard stuff tonight, folks. Fender. And I will not repeat my party trick from earlier, which you will have missed, where I went to drink my cup of tea and missed my mouth entirely. Hence, I've had to change into another top. I just literally went straight down my top. It was hilarious. But hey, managed to start the stream on time. So, what are we going to be talking about tonight? We are going to be talking about compression and compressors in particular, which was a request, actually. And actually, it'd be really cool if you have an idea for a topic for me to cover that you would like to discuss, that you would like to have some questions answered, or to give these live streams a little bit of focus, then that would be cool. I've been asked by a couple of people via Facebook message and email, hey, it'd be really cool if you could go over the basics of compression, because we're not really sure what we're doing. So I thought, you know what, that's actually a really good idea. Now, granted, there are probably thousands of compression plugins that you can get. And I've had some requests to look at particular ones, specific ones. But, you know, if I was to do that, then I'd have to go through everybody's suggestions, and we'd be here until the middle of next week still going over compressors. And I just really don't have the time for downloading lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of compressors. So that's what we're going to do. So I have Studio One open, and we're going to look at the different parameters of a compressor. So we'll start with the stock Studio One compressor, and we'll look at all the parameters of the basic compressor and how you can fairly quickly just get going with it with just a little bit of basic understanding of how to apply compression. And then as you gain more experience and as your ears get more and more sensitive to hearing compression and what compression does, then you can start to use compression more strategically than just reducing the dynamic range of a particular audio source. Sorry, clobbered the mic there. Essentially, compression is basically taking a waveform, here's a waveform, and basically narrowing its dynamic range. So you are turning down the loud bits, and you are also turning up the quieter parts. So that would include any noise that's in the room, any noise that's in the cabling, any noise that's in the housing of the microphone. All of that kind of stuff gets turned up as well. So you have to bear all of that in mind, which is and any kind of low rumble that you might already have present in your recording. So essentially that is what compression does. It is an automatic volume control. Essentially, it is like having somebody sit with their finger on your fader in Studio One and just moving it up and down by a predetermined amount when you tell them to do it, and when you tell them to turn it back up again. So essentially that is what compression does fundamentally. It helps you to get things under control, so you're not having to constantly move faders around, constantly adjust your mix all the time with this getting lost. Oh, but this is getting lost as well now. Oh, hang on, this is getting lost as well. It kind of helps deal with all of that, so things are a bit more controlled, and you can, you know, kind of like parking your car at a shopping mall. You are parking your audio particular track. It might be a guitar, it might be a vocal, it might be a piano, it might be a snare drum, a kick drum, overheads, violins, kazoos, spoons, Jaws harp, whatever it might be. That's what you're doing fundamentally. So we will talk at that a little bit more in detail, and I'm going to take your questions as well. I see some have already posted in their questions, which is cool. We'll get to all of your questions as I'm talking. Be thinking of questions you've got, pop them in the chat, and I will keep an eye on those, and I will either kind of reference those questions as we go, or I will get to them at the end, or one or t'other, whichever way round we end up doing it. As you know, I don't particularly plan or prepare these kind of things, but there you go. So what I want to do right now is I want to get Studio One open and get the screen shared in Google Hangouts. Yes, I'm still using Google Hangouts to do this. Not a lot I can do about that at the moment. However, a friend of mine, just today, we were talking about this, and we were bemoaning the fact that I don't have very much bandwidth, which means that these streams are just not particularly great visually, and maybe not necessarily audio as well. So they're not particularly high quality streams. So certainly when you compare it to something like Jonny's streams, which are phenomenally beautiful to look at, and they sound great as well. Dave Vignola's streams as well. I just don't have the bandwidth for that. I've talked about that on many and various occasions. But a friend of mine actually pointed me to a potential solution. So hopefully I might actually be able to move everything forward and I'm going to look at investing in one of those little USB dongles that allows you to connect your computer to a mobile telephone service. So like something, I don't know what the United States equivalent of EE might be, which is one of the networks here. It's a network that I use for my cell phone, but basically using a cell phone network so that I can access the internet via that method. And I can get, apparently, using the 4G network, I can get much faster upload speeds, up to 10 or 15 or even 20 megs per second, which would be awesome. And I could do high quality, high resolution streams. So I'm going to look into getting one of those. It does mean there's going to be a little bit of a cost outlay for these streams. So I'm going to have to think a little bit carefully about that. But anyway, that's another aside. So hopefully we'll be moving these streams forward in terms of quality, which is what I want to do. So compression. What are the parameters of a compressor? Let's go take a look. Let's grab this compressor here and we'll put it on the drum bus, just because I need to put it somewhere so that we can see the GUI. Now, we're all Studio One guys and girls for the most part, so you're probably going to be very familiar with all of these, but this is my default. Your default will probably not look anything like the settings that I have here. I don't know why that is in my default, because it shouldn't be. However, I tend to have this set at a 30 millisecond attack and a 50 millisecond release. These are kind of what I would call my average, most used kind of attack and release settings. And I'm going to get on to what attack and release are in just a minute, and how you use them. So let's work from this side through to this side, because this is basically the logical direction in which compression actually happens. Hold on a second. Excuse me. Alrighty. So we start off with the ratio. The ratio tells you, or tells your compressor, by how much you want to compress, how much you want to you want the dynamic range of your audio track to be reduced. The threshold is when do we want the ratio to start happening. Okay, so reduction ratio, minimum level of threshold, when you want the compression to kick in. We'll talk about the knee later on, because this is a little bit kind of complicated to get your head around. Took me ages to get my head around what the knee does. For absolutely ages. Even when in my Cubase years, I would just leave this in its default setting, because I just really didn't know what to do with it. It was just like, oh, that's pretty. It's a knob called the knee. Right. I mean, why didn't they call it the elbow or the earlobe? I don't know. So I just kind of left it for a lot of years until I started doing some reading around and talking to other engineers about what this thing might do. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. So ratio is how much, threshold is when, attack and release are to do with kind of how quickly you compress and how quickly you release. Release is fairly self-explanatory. Attack is to do with how quickly the compressor engages once it detects audio that has crossed the threshold. So how quickly the compressor enacts this 2-to-1 ratio. To its fullest amount, so whatever the ratio setting is there. And the release is the speed at which the compressor returns the signal to its original input volume. And then your makeup gain is to make up the difference between how much you've lost with compression to get your signal balanced. Okay? So this is when to let go. This is when to compress. I don't really like the term attack and release. I never really have done. Release is kind of, I would call attack more kind of like punch. How much punch do you want to extract from your audio? How punchy do you want it to sound? Would be how I refer to the attack, and the release is pretty much how kind of when do I want to stop? When do I want to stop compressing? I suppose. So really, I would kind of, okay, release I would kind of use. Attack I think of in terms of punch. So that's kind of like the basics of how a compressor works. Now, whether you're using one of these style compressors or something a bit different, let's pin this over here, or something a bit different, like, for example, this guy here. Where I'm going to put this. I'll put this in the same place here. And I will pin this down here. And I'm actually going to collapse that so that I've got access to both of those. So whether you're dealing with this kind of compressor with very easy to use, very easy to grasp parameters, or whether you're dealing with something like this, which is a little bit different. This has just got a compression knob and a makeup gain knob, and then this timing thing, which is all to do with your attack and release, basically all in one. And there are some specifics about how this 1 to 6 works that kind of goes back to the 1950s. So 1 here would be fast attack, fast release. This would be slow attack, slow release, and then you've got different variations within that. When you have you can have a fast attack, slow release, slow attack, fast release, and all the possible combinations thereof. So this kind of compressor is a little bit different, and yes, it does do the same job. It compresses audio. It reduces the dynamic range when you want to, when you need it. But some of these are fixed, and some of these are not. It kind of depends, and there are different compressors that kind of like they might have attack and release, or they might not. Like, for example, the LA2A doesn't have an attack and release. Those are fixed. So you kind of have to know kind of what the attack and release parameters of an LA2A are, so you can get the results that you want from an LA2A. But at the end of the day, your ear should always be your guide. Your ear should instruct you whether you're over compressing, under compressing, or kind of whether it's in the right kind of ballpark, whatever compressor you're using. This guy is a beauty. I love this Klanghelm MJUC compressor, because basically you get 3 compressors for the price of one. You get the Mark 1, Mark 2. This has variable attack and release and variable ratio. And then you have this guy, the Mark 3, which is much more modern looking. And you get a whole bunch of extra buttons here that I don't really know kind of what they do. Apart from the high ratio one, know what that one does. Again, variable attack and release. And then you got this punch button, which is, again, I don't really know what it does other than it gives you extra punch. It allows more transient through than the attack. I don't know how it does it, but it sounds pretty good, particularly if I'm doing parallel compression. This punch thing is just killer. It's awesome. But again, it's just a compress knob. How much do you want to compress? You turn it up and you watch this dial until you're happy with it, and then you make up the gain. Or you can set the makeup gain to auto gain compensation over here. But even with this switched on, you can still adjust the makeup gain if you want to. It's really quite cool, and it's calibrated to -18 dB. That's another thing to bear in mind, is that 0 equals -18 on some of these kind of analog style compressors. So you need to bear in mind what your input signal level is. Whereas these ones like this stock compressor, which is just basically, it's just a compressor. It just literally just compresses the audio. It doesn't add any color, or any saturation or any harmonics or anything like that. You know, you're not running through any kind of virtual tubes or anything like that. Whereas something like this Klanghelm compressor, you are. So with this, it almost doesn't really matter too much what your input level is or what you know, just as long as it's not at 0 dB. But I would basically, my rule of thumb would be try and make sure that you are gain staging into a compressor somewhere between -12 and -18. That would be my rule of thumb. Okay, so we've kind of talked about ratio and threshold a little bit, and we've talked about attack and release a little bit, and kind of what they are and what they do. Okay, so those are the bare basics of how compression actually works, and we're going to look at the 1176 and LA2A emulations that are in the fat channel as well. So I'm going to get that out like that, and we'll go to the compressor, and we'll go to the tube. This is the LA2A here. I'm not going to switch that on just now, but yeah, basically you have your peak reduction knob here and your gain knob, similar to the Klanghelm in Mark 1 in that respect. You just turn this one up until you're happy with how much gain reduction, and then you make up the gain with this. But this also has a little sidechain filter here as well, so you can roll off some of the low end, so the low end goes through without hitting the compressor, which is very, very, very handy, I have to say, because there are certain instances, like if you were to put this on, I don't think I would ever put an LA2A on my mix bus, but if I were to, then I would want to roll off the low end out of it so that the low end is not triggering the compressor and making it pump like crazy. Because low end will hit a compressor harder and make the compressor compress more than any other frequency in the frequency spectrum. So you have the LA2A, and this is the 1176 here. Similar kind of thing, input, output, and attack and release, and then you've got these ratio buttons here, and then you've got an all button here. The all button is what you would use if you were wanting to do extremely heavy compression, parallel compression. Again, you've got a sidechain filter, and yeah, basically you just dial up this input until you're happy with how much gain reduction you're getting at the ratio that you're getting it, and then you adjust your attack and release. Now, here's the thing with an 1176, and they very helpfully on the Presonus one here, giving you the guidance that you don't get on a real 1176. You get numbers 1 to 10 on a real 1176, which I think it's 1 to 7 in actual fact, and they've replaced them here with telling you that this is fast and this is slow. So these dials are backwards compared to the stock compressor here. So that's something to bear in mind, is that these are the other way around. So that's another thing for you to get used to. So we will take a bit more of a look in detail at these. We will have a listen to each one of these compressors. Excuse me one more time. Sorry, I have a bit of wind tonight. And we're okay so long as it doesn't come out the other end. So yeah, so that's the MJUC, the fat channel LA2A and 1176 compressors. They are cool. But there are other compressors that you get as well on channel strips, like the SSL, which we will come on to in a little while. So compression is extremely useful for a variety of reasons, because not only can you control the dynamic range of your audio source, so that you can park it nicely where you want it in your mix, but you can also use compression to control whether something is up front in your mix or whether it's further back in your mix. And to do that, to get that kind of thing happening, this is where the attack parameter of a compressor comes into its own, and really skillful use of the attack on your compressor will help you kind of like give a three-dimensional shape to your mix, so that it's not flat and two-dimensional, which, you know, kind of when you're starting out, your mixes tend to be a little bit kind of, well, yeah, they're coming out of the left and right, but that's it. Everything's kind of up front, but left and right. But as you go and you understand more about strategic use of the attack on a compressor, you begin to understand the concept that with a fast attack or a faster attack, that's going to the compressor is going to grab hold of the transient earlier on, which means you're going to have less punch, which means you can use that to push that audio source further back in the mix without having to adjust the fader to do that. Because though you want it to sit further back in the mix, you still don't want it to get lost in your mix. So that's where the attack really comes into its own. And again, if, you know, the opposite is also true. If you want something to be up front in your mix, kind of like slapping you in the face, or kind of having that sense of jumping out the speakers, that's where you would want to have a slower attack, so you're allowing more transient to come through before the compressor engages with your audio. And that will give you the impression that audio is coming through more forward in your mix. So that's going to be really helpful for things like your lead vocal, or in EDM, it would be extremely useful for a kick drum. For example, if because I think you would probably parallel compress a kick drum sound anyway. But, you know, if you kind of did that with a slower attack time, maybe you would have that kick drum really, really coming really forward in your mix and have a real kind of important part to play in your mix. So that's where you're going from using compression to control the dynamics of an audio, so that you're not kind of like having to constantly turn things up or turn things down, or use massive amounts of sorry, that's David Vignola's just messaged me on Facebook to give me some breaking news. For those of you that have my MIDI drums Made Easy Volume 1, then I can give you some breaking news just now. That MIDI drums Made Easy Volume 2 is going to go on sale at 0800 hours his time. I forget what time zone he's in. If somebody knows that, can you please let me know? But yeah, it's 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So if you want to be one of the first to go and get it, go get it and be the first in. So there you go. Short plug for MIDI Drums Made Easy Volume 2. I'm really excited about it. It's fantastic. It's probably the best thing I've ever done since I started my studio business a few years back. So it's really cool. I'm really proud of it. And for all you drum programmers out there, I think you're really going to dig it, and it's really going to take your programming to the next level. End of advert. Okay, and we're back to compression. So yes, forward and back, side, left and right. Raina says, please look at the chat. Sorry, it's hard for me to kind of look at the chat whilst I'm doing a demonstration in Studio One. I do apologize. Let's go and have a look. All right, so where are we? Oh, no plugins showing. Really? Oh man, you're kidding me. Thanks, Dooley. We can pretty much talk about what we want and he'll never know. All right, so I'm gonna have to start all of that again. Okay, we will do that. Hang on just 1 second and I will fix this. I'll stop sharing the screen and we will start again. And I'll do share entire screen. I had set it up to share the wrong thing. That's all that happened. Was I set it up to share the whole thing, so it was literally just showing this and not any of the pop-ups. I'm really, really sorry about that, guys. I had it set up to just showing Studio One application, forgetting that Google Hangouts doesn't show the plugins. So I'm really sorry about that. Schoolboy error. So this is what I was showing you. And yes, you see, I only have one screen. So when I'm doing this, when I'm looking at Studio One to do a demo, this is all I have. I don't have a separate screen with the chat up, unfortunately. I should probably work out how to do that. Let's see. Let's see. Could I pop that out as an extra window, maybe? I'm not really sure. I don't know. I've kind of popped this out as an extra window. I'm not really sure whether I'm going to be able to see that overlaid over Studio One or not. I probably am not. No. All right. Am I going to have to start all over again? I'm sorry, guys. I do apologize. Have I lost a whole bunch of viewers? I bet you've all kind of walked out on me now. Maybe I'll stream to YouTube on my phone. Yes, I probably could, actually. Yeah, it's just chat would be really tiny. Man, what a disaster. What an absolute disaster. Plugins not showing. Can you show the compressor? Okay. A quick recap is all that's needed, says Peter. Okay, I will do that. I'll do that. Okay, so ratio 2:1. Ratio is how much compression. Threshold is when. Attack is how fast you want the compressor to compress. Release is kind of how quickly you want it to release. And return to normal. And the makeup gain is to make up for the gain reduction you lose over here. So if you are compressing by 6 dB on average, so you're watching this, you're watching kind of like, and then you can make you make a rough guesstimate, and you look at the input and the output, and what you want to try and do is use your makeup gain to balance the input and the output. So if your input is peaking at -9, then with the makeup gain here, you want your output to be around about -9 as well. It doesn't have to be exactly precise, just kind of roughly in that area, and then flip bypass a few times. And if you can hear that when it's engaged, it's louder than when it's not engaged, then you need to adjust your gain here until you cannot hear an audible difference between the volume of compressor on and compressor off. Okay, there you go. I didn't say that bit earlier. I didn't think of that. So the knee, yes, the knee is something I didn't really know what it was all about. It took me a very, very long time to get it. The knee is a bit of a funny one. If I were to pull this down a little bit, the knee here, this little blue dot, is the threshold. When audio passes this dot here, and what you see normally is another blue dot will go up here when the audio is playing, which I can do in just a second. You'll see that it goes past this blue dot here. When it passes this blue dot, it has passed the threshold, and the compressor will be active. Now, what the knee does is the knee is another part of that smart little volume control thing that we talked about. So if attack is how fast and is how fast to compress, and release is how fast or how slow to return to normal, then the knee is how smoothly. Okay, So you can have that virtual volume controller that we're talking about. If you imagine that in your mind's eye for a moment, you can have that. Your attack and release is going to tell you, let's say you have a fast attack, then you want that fader to turn down very quickly. And say you've got fast attack, fast release, then you want it to turn down very quickly and then turn back up very quickly. Down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Well, the knee here is the setting that tells the compressor how smoothly to apply that attack and release. It's very, very cool. So you can have it really soft. The softer it is, the more transparent it's going to be. The smoother the application of compression is going to be. The smoother of the attack and release is going to be. You can have it the other way, and you can have it really sharp. Now, if I turn the ratio up a bit, you can see the angle is a little bit more exaggerated here. So when audio crosses this dot, it's going to be compressed by a ratio of 16:1, which is why this line is almost flat. If I keep going to 20:1, it is pretty much entirely flat. So a lot of dBs are being knocked off here. And we've got it with a hard knee. So basically, it's not smooth at all. It's quite abrupt. In fact, it's very abrupt. But if I soften this off, have a look at what happens now. Now it's very, very smooth. It's like a baby's bottom, in fact. Or my forehead. Nice and smooth. All right. So that's what the knee does. So there you go. Now you know. And now you're a step ahead of where I was when I started out. In fact, you're a big step, because I didn't get this for years. Okay, so what else did I cover that you couldn't see? I think I talked about this guy, the Klanghelm, which you didn't see before. This is a different breed of compressor altogether. You've got 3 compressors for the price of 1. This is kind of a little bit more, the Mark 1 is a little bit more like an LA2A, except you do get the variable timing. Which is kind of like a combination of attack and release, basically, is what this is. And you've got compression mode or limiting mode. And basically, to get compression, you just turn this guy up, and then you make it up. You can make up your gain here with the makeup gain knob. And that's pretty much all she wrote. That's all there is to it with the Mark 1. There is this little hidden thing at the bottom where you can add a little bit of color. You can add some, you can have it dark or hi-fi sounding. And basically this just adds a little bit of harmonic excitement to it. So the hi-fi, it kind of like gives you a little bit of high-end sparkle, some clarity. This is kind of like a much darker kind of tone. And then the drive, you can add some saturation to your compression. And then you've got a sidechain filter, which again, you can use to roll off low end out of the compressor, so that anything below, let's say we rolled it to 250, anything below 250 is not going to be affected by the compressor at all. And then you've got a wet dry knob, which is very, very cool for parallel compression. Pretty awesome. And you can hide that away if you don't want it. And then the Mark II, you've got a kind of sort of semi-variable ratio. And then you've got a variable attack and release, fast, slow, fast, slow. It's all very cool. Then you've got this density and I stage. The I stage basically engages a second set of virtual tubes or something like that in the compressor. This is modeling. I don't know what that compressor is, by the way. So you got 2 to 1, 4 to 1, 8 to 1 limiting. Then this one, again, you've got that I stage, you've got the density as well. Again, I don't really know what it's adding, but it's adding something cool. And then you got this high ratio, which is great for kind of parallel compression again. And you got this punch slider, 0 to 3. Again, don't really know what it's doing, but it really does add punch when you engage it, particularly if you're doing parallel compression and you want a lot more kind of, well, punch. It's great. So that's that one, and then of course you've got the fat channel in Studio One 3.5, and you get the LA2A, and you get the 1176, and they're both very cool. Again, input and output. This knob here controls how much compression you want. That's your makeup gain, and then you've got your variable attack and release. Note that these guys are backwards compared to these guys over here. I hope everyone can see that. I'm just going to check and make sure everybody is happy with what's on the screen now. Can everyone see? Still here, using our imagination to visualize. Well, you should be able to see this. Yeah, you should be able to see all of the stuff on the screen. That's what I'm hoping you can see anyway. Okay. Just going to flip back to the chat there for a second. Normally we all know fast review. Okay, you guys check out JL's bathroom whilst you're wandering around waiting. Dooley, I'm not really quite sure what you're talking about there. You should be able to see the screen. Can you solo the track and let us hear it in action? Yes, I'm going to get to that. What is the difference in use, input gain versus gain, which I understand is your makeup gain? And Peter says we can see it all now. Yes. Rich says when the threshold is reduced, the level is reduced as it is being compressed. So makeup gain returns the output to the original volume level. Yes, exactly. And I think I said that, but maybe I didn't explain it quite as well. There you go. Okay, hopefully I've not missed anything there, and hopefully you guys are now able to see what I can see. Downloaded MIDI drums made easy volume 2 already. Really? I'm surprised at that because I was told that that's going live at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Good. Thank you, Rich. I did say all that. That's good. That is good. See, this is kind of like the problems I have with streaming at the moment. But hopefully, as I say, with some new gear, we can make all of this a lot better. All right, let's actually get into compressing some sound because that's what you really want. You really want to hear what all this stuff does. So I'm going to reset that to default. I'm going to disable that. I'm going to put that to 0. I'm going to turn that one off. And I'm going to turn that guy off as well. So we've just got the one thing happening. Now, what you're going to hear, you're not going to hear rocking, pumping drums in this particular audio example. You're going to hear brushes. Now, brushes, you have to compress very, very carefully because otherwise it's going to sound like you're raking the yard, which you don't want. You don't want that kind of scratchy sound. So you have to be very careful how you compress this. So let's solo up the drums and we'll get into this from here. I'm just going to solo up the drums first and then we'll hear it all in context afterwards. But I'm going to kind of exaggerate things a wee bit so you can, let's just set this kind of middle and set that kind of middle as well. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull back this threshold until we get a little bit of compression going. And then we're going to go crazy and we're going to over-exaggerate it. So it's actually quite quiet. These drums were recorded in my hallway, by the way, with a little bit of, I put some room reverb on it. All right, so we've got some fairly light compression going on here. Well, very light, actually, just a couple of dB. Now, what I would normally do is, I've seen that on average, it's about 2 and a bit dB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the makeup gain up, not by that much, by about the same. And let's see if we can balance the input and output signal. Now, hopefully, it might not translate very well over my meager bandwidth, my broadband, but hopefully what you can hear is when I have the compressor engaged, the snare drum appears to come forward a little bit, and the kick drum has a little bit more boom to it. There's a little bit more room that you can hear with just this very subtle little bit of compression going on. Now, I can actually go completely bonkeroony with this and pull this right down and then make up the gain, and it should sound like you're raking the lawn. That's obviously way, way, way too much compression going on there. But I think you can hear the idea that you can hear the I've got this set medium and medium here, so you can probably hear the compressor when I've got it really exaggerated. You can hear the compressor actually grabbing hold of particularly the snare drum and squashing it down. And then it's kind of releasing maybe a little bit at the wrong time, because when the kick drum hits, it just affects everything really quite detrimentally there. Let's see if we've got any questions. You guys are talking about the FET compressor. So in the FET compressor, the input is the threshold and the output's the makeup gain. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, sort of. Peter says my favorite compressor is the Brainworks Opto compressor. Yes, it's pretty cool. I don't have that yet, actually. I know that you can get it if you've got a PreSonus interface as part of that Sample Magic package that you can get. And you guys are talking all about plugins, which is cool. Woodby says, I hear it. Good. So you can hear that exaggerated amount of compression going on there. So with brushes in particular, you don't want to go crazy. In fact, in jazz music in general, you just don't want to go crazy. So I'm going to bypass that just now. I'm going to let you hear a bit of this track, actually. So you hear the context of where these brushes were are coming from. Oh, still got the tracks soloed. Not clever. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So that's a piece that I wrote fairly recently called Spoken Softly. So that's the context for these drums, the brushes that we had a look at with the compressor. So we've looked at the fat channel, the FET compressor, and the LA2A compressor, and the MJUC. MJUC is extremely cool. I think I've said that before abundantly, how cool it is, and what you can do with it. So I appear to have lost the pop-up for the chat. Oh well, sorry about that, guys. But that's interesting. Not mixed brushes before. Yeah. Rena says very low quality but wonderful piece of sound. Okay, I'm not really sure what that meant exactly. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. We can always go back to Studio One in a little while. But has anyone got any further questions? And as soon as I say that, Peter comes up with one. Multiband compression. Any words on it? Yeah, multiband compression is a bit of a tough beast. Yes, sorry, Rainer. Yeah, stream quality. Yeah. Yeah, there's, as I say, at the moment, there's not a great deal I can do with the stream quality. We're kind of limited to what I have just at the moment. So, as I said at the start of the broadcast, hopefully that's something that we can change. I'm looking into getting one of those USB dongles that will allow me to use the cellular network to broadcast. And I've been told I can get much higher upload speed and therefore greater bandwidth by doing that. So looking into some of those options and how much they cost and whether it's worth investing in for these live streams. Kind of depends upon how popular these streams get, I guess. At the moment, we have 15 people in here, which is actually pretty good. That's pretty cool. 15 really, really good people. A multiband compression, to answer Peter's question. Any words on it? Yes, it's very, very useful if you want to deal with compressing specific frequencies. For example, you can use a multiband compressor to do some de-essing, or to deal with, like, I don't know, like hiss on a guitar track, for example. You can find that area and then you can use a particular bandwidth on your multiband compressor to basically just compress that particular frequency, that particular part of the frequency spectrum. Would a multiband compressor and a dynamic EQ be comparable? Yes, I think possibly, yeah. They do similar things. Yeah, the multiband compressor, you can actually have different compression ratios for different frequencies. So you could have, be very, very heavily compressing the low end, but very, very lightly compressing the top end, and vice versa. Or you could have 4 different compressors effectively controlling different parts of your frequency spectrum. Can I take a dynamic EQ and multiband compress? I would suggest that's something you could try. You could try that on your audio source and see what happens. I don't see why not. Anybody else with any other questions? Bobby Booth says, that's what I heard too. Yes. I need to look into how expensive that's going to be, because if I'm going to be broadcasting for an hour, I need to find out how much of the broadband limit I'm using. in that hour. John Anderson, good to see you, buddy. He says, I saw a video you did on the new fat channel strip. Still your first choice in sequence, gate expander to compressor, the EQ. Yes, I did do, as part of my Studio One 3.5 series, I did take a look at the new fat channel and take a look at particularly the compressors and the EQ, that you get those new fantastic choices. And we've taken another look just now at the compressors in particular. Yes, I still EQ into a compressor for the most part. There are occasions where I will do it the other way around, but for the most part, I am EQing into a compressor. And particularly, actually, when I am using a channel strip, for example, like the SSL E channel, I always have that set to EQ into the compressor. In actual fact, one of the things I meant to look at just now was the SSL channel strips and how the compressors work on there, because they have fixed attack. So the way that works is when the fast attack is engaged, it is extremely fast. And it's considerably slower when it's not engaged. But yes, the fast attack is very fast on the SSL. I think it's 1 millisecond, so it's pretty fast. Peter says, I was wondering what an optical compressor is doing different from the other kind. Well, there are a whole bunch of different types and styles of compression, different ways in which different compressors work, and how they apply the compression to the audio and how they detect the audio. I don't really 100% know what goes on under the hood. Oh, that's my wife. She's messaging me. And she says she's still up and she's too busy chatting to her mum and her stepdad. What is the difference in the SSL-E and the SSL-G? Okay, that we can look at. Let me go back to Studio One, and I will very quickly get those channel strips open. And matter of fact, let's go to the Waves channel strips. SSL channel stereo. Let's put this on brass. And I'm going to pin that one up there. Don't worry, you're going to get to see these in a second, so don't kind of complain that I'm not showing them just yet. I'm just actually getting them set up. And then I'm going to share the screen. If you give me 1 second, I have to make sure I share the entire screen. Alrighty, so hopefully you should be able to, in just a second. I have to wait to see. There is quite a delay. Let's see. Can you see? There you go. You should now be able to see the E channel and the G channel. Well, they kind of look a little bit different. The E is kind of black and the G is kind of gray, but there is a significant difference. You could say the G channel is a little bit grittier, a little bit more aggressive. The G channel is really great for rock. Really great for rock guitars in particular and rock vocals. This is fantastic. If you mix a lot of rock music, then the G channel is a really good option for you. That's not to say the E channel isn't, but this is just particularly grittier, particularly if you drive it a little bit harder. You get some really cool saturation that is going to really enhance a good rock tune using this. The E channel is kind of a bit warmer. and not quite so aggressive, not quite so gritty. I use this extensively actually since I got it, because actually the E channel is the channel that I'm a bit more familiar with in real terms, in an actual hardware hands-on, in those terms, because when I started out in the late 1980s, um, I first learned mixing on an SSL E channel, E console, that these guys come out of. So I learned by turning these knobs and these dials, and that's how I learned how to mix. And I had some pretty good teachers back then. But if you take a look at the compressor section on each, they're pretty much identical. You have a variable ratio, you have a variable release, but you have a fixed attack. It's either fast or it's slow. Fast is 1 millisecond. Slow, I think, is about 30 or so milliseconds. So it's still fairly quick. And then you've got your threshold knob over here. And you also get an expander, a gate expander section here as well, which is very cool. And then on the G, you pretty much get mostly the same. Again, the even on the expander, it's fixed attack or release, or fast or slow. So that's those guys. I hope that's been helpful. And let's go back to the chat here. So I hope that helped, Bobby. Raina says, I found the cymbal stander running gag. Oh, yes, the cymbal stand, yes. Actually, I need to stop sharing my screen, don't I? Because you don't want to see double the screens. If time allows, can you cover how to use a gate, snare or kick versus an expander? Where are we? We're coming up on just after 1 o'clock in the morning here. Essentially, a gate is either open or closed, and you tell it when to open and when to close. With an expander, you can it's a little bit more subtle. So you can kind of you can have it slightly ajar. You can have the door slightly open. So kind of it's not so kind of open, closed, open, closed, open, closed, which is what a gate is. Gate is either open or shut. An expander kind of is a little bit more subtle, kind of a little bit open, and then it's kind of not always completely closed. So that's what an expander does. I use an expander if I'm wanting to get rid of noise. Like, let's say I have a guitar track and there's some amp hum at the end of the song when the song fades out. There's some amp hum or some hiss or something like that. I would either use a low pass filter on the EQ and automate that and sweep it out, or I would use an expander on the guitar, so that basically when the audio goes past the threshold, basically what the expander does is the expander starts to reduce the signal to your given amount on the expander. I probably need to demonstrate it rather than show it. I'm gonna have to share my screen again. Yeah, share entire screen. Put that away. Let's remove these SSLs now because I don't need them. We'll remove that and that and that. Okay, let's go and close that. Let's go and open Presonus, and let's go find the here's the gate. So I'm going to chuck the gate up on the drums, things you're talking about drums. So basically the gate is either open or shut, and the threshold, it tells you when it's going to open and when it's going to close. And then you've got standard compression kind of settings here, attack and release, how quickly it's going to open, and closing time. Basically open and closed. Attack and release is open, closed. How fast are you going to open? How fast are you going to close? And then this is kind of a hold. I never really used this. I never really changed the hold time. These are the guys I change. And then the open and the close threshold. So basically the open is when you want the gate to open, and then the close threshold is the level at which you want it to close relative to the opening threshold. So you got two thresholds essentially, one for opening and one for closing, and then attack and release, how fast you open, how fast you close. And you can sync it to the tempo as well, which is very, very cool. And you can actually, not only can you do that, you can actually use the gate to trigger MIDI, which is fantastic if you're wanting to do sample replacement. If you've got a really honky sounding drum, but you love the performance, but when you try and EQ it, it actually hinders rather than helps, sample replacement is your friend, and you can use the gate to trigger the sample. Very, very cool. So that's a gate. An expander, I use this, as I say, for removing noise. Put this over here. And again, you have a threshold and a range and a ratio. So these are kind of fairly standard compressor style values here, attack and release. Again, attack is all to do with opening, and release is all to do with closing. But an expander can be a lot more transparent than a gate. So if you want something to kind of like works more softly than just a straight open or closed of a gate, then expander is your friend. I use this quite a lot in voiceovers, which is great actually. It does great for voiceovers because you can remove room noise in between spoken words. You can get rid of background noise, you can get rid of heating, you can get rid of fans, whatever you've got going in the background. An expander will get rid of that when you're not speaking. And then you basically just want to dial it in to a point where you don't actually hear the effect of it. It's transparent. So this is where you play with your attack and release until you're happy with it. And then your threshold, well, this is all to do with how much you want the expander to shut down any noise that you've got. Okay, so that's what the expander does. And that's Johnny Guy messaging me. So I hope that's helpful. We'll go back to the chat. Sorry, I have no idea on optical. Maybe Jonny Lipsham does. Yeah, I don't really quite know exactly how the optical aspect of an optical compressor works. I just know that it processes audio in a different way, and you end up with different kind of color, different kind of textures as a result. So Dooley says, so a gate keeps all the cows and stuff in, but an expander will let chicken and cats out. Well, sort of. It kind of does that. But it's not a case of it being, open, shut, like a book, like a door, like a gate. An expander kind of opens like it's a bit more fluid, you know what I mean? So I would use, when would I use a gate? When would I use an expander? This might help you a bit better. I would use a gate if I want an abrupt effect, like if I want a really, really choked snare drum. that is, kind of is literally, bah, that kind of bah kind of sound. If I wanted to get that, then I would use a gate, because I want to just literally have the transient and nothing else. So I'd use a gate to do that. But if I wanted to, just to dial out a little bit of, let's say on the toms, all right. Let's say whenever I'm hitting the snare drum, the toms are vibrating sympathetically, which can happen. Now you could put 0 rings on that. You could put wallets on that. You could put wads of toilet paper on that to kind of deal with that. It's a lo-fi way of dealing with it. Or you could use an expander and set the expander so that when the tom is struck, after the tom hit has happened, the expander basically reduces the volume, turns the volume down of the signal going through the mic. So you could use clip gain, sorry, not clip gain. You could chop everything up in the edit view if you really wanted to, rather than using a gate. I prefer to keep everything quite natural sounding. I like natural sounds. So if there's a little bit of sympathetic vibration, I tend to keep that in. However, if once you start using a compressor on your drum bus, then what's going to happen is all of that sympathetic vibration is going to go up in volume as you're compressing. So then I would probably go, hey, you know what, that's kind of muddying up the drum sound. That's when I'll go and slap an expander on those toms and use that to kind of dial down some of that sympathetic vibration, so that basically the only time audio is coming through is when the tom is actually being struck. And then it's opening nice and soft, and it's closing nice and soft as well. So that's what I would do. John says, thank you, Johnny, for doing this. Cleaned up a few things for me. Well, you know what? I appreciate that. We have 13 people here now. We've lost a couple, which is a bit of a shame. We've been going for an hour and a quarter. Has anyone got any more questions? I'm just going to take a quick drink. And whilst I'm doing that, you guys can think of some questions and get them typed in. Raina, good to see you, mate. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your company. As I say, my wife and kids are out of town, so I can stay up a little bit longer. They're not going to be home until much later, probably in the morning. So there we go. Look, I'm really sorry. I messed up the demo. Do apologize about that. Next time, I will be a bit more mindful of which button I hit when I share stuff. In regards to using the expander on the tom, as you covered, would you have used a slower attack to just tame the tom? Well, with an expander, I'm not using it to tame anything in particular, not in a compression sense. I'm using it to basically just kind of like not allow noise I don't want to go through. Peter says, does input quantize mean my MIDI performance will quantize automatically? You mean in terms of the recording panel options that are at the bottom of your screen when you're in recording? Yes, if that's what you're referring to, then input quantize does mean that MIDI performances will be quantized to the value that you set. So if you set the value to 16ths, then whatever you play on your MIDI keyboard will be 16th notes, which can actually be helpful and sometimes not quite so helpful. Dooley says, in your example, can you use the expander after it's recording during mixing? Yes. That's primarily when I use the expander. So I would record something like a voiceover, and then I'd put the expander on after the fact to deal with any room noise that I might have. It's particularly great for present, a recorded presentation, like if somebody's giving a lecture or if somebody's preaching. Really, really useful. You can dial out a lot of stuff. The Waves NS1 is a noise suppressor that does pretty much exactly the same thing, and it's just one little volume fader. I don't know if I've shown you this. I think I did a product review on it, but for those of you that haven't seen it, I'll do a quick show for you just now. I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Don't panic. But I'm just going to show you how this Waves NS1 works, because I think it's really rather awesome. Where am I going to put it? I might have to just close this song and open something else up. Close. Do I want to save changes? No. Let me see. Can I find some voiceover audio? Oh, here we go. I've got an actual demo. Okay, so I've got some audio here, and I'm going to show you the NS1 in action. I'm going to dial that down to 0. Let me just check that you guys can actually see this. Can you see this? Dilly says, so the expander raises your voice above the noise floor. Yeah, pretty much. I think that's pretty much exactly what's going on there. Can you guys see my screen yet? Or have I not shared it? I think I've forgotten to share it, haven't I? Yes, I have forgotten to share it. Share your entire screen. There we go. Alrighty, you should be able to see it in just a sec. There we go. Bingo. You guys should be able to see it now. So here is the Waves NS1, and it's basically just a fader. It's brilliant. I love this little device. So if I play this piece of audio, and you're going to hear me speaking from a recording I made, and you're going to hear that there is a fan in the background. I mocked this up totally, by the way. And so it is that this is often how it goes when you are reading that passage in particular. It just takes a little bit of time to understand it. So what you need to do is you need to like back up a bit, read maybe the whole. So you can hear there that if we forget about the EQ and the compressor just for a minute, you can hear that there's a fan in the background. What we can do is we can use this NS1 here, and we can turn this up until we lose the fan altogether. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shorten this loop to there, and I'm going to try and remember what's my keyboard shortcut for looping. I'm not sure I can remember what it is. It doesn't matter. I'll just use this button down here. Okay, so let's just listen to the fan, and then we're going to lose the fan with the NS1. Now, obviously, I could push this a lot higher, and it's completely gone. But the trouble is that once we get the audio in, and so it is that this is often how it goes when you are reading that passage in particular. it just takes a little bit of time to understand it. So what you need to do is you need to like back up a bit, read maybe the whole page before that, analyze. Now the problem is, if I turn this all the way up, then you get a whole bunch of unpleasant artifacts. You lose some of the top end. It becomes a bit choppier. So you don't want it that much. You basically want to find the sweet spot. And so it is that this is often how it goes when you are reading that passage in particular. And I think I found it around about 22.5%. I think it's percent on this scale. And that's how that works. And I think essentially this noise suppressor is effectively an expander. It's just automatic. All of the settings are just totally automatic, and you can just dial it in and forget it. All right, so I hope that I hope that helped. Hope that helped somebody. So hopefully you should now be able to see the screen. See me again, actually. Would I suggest using the NS1 instead of the S1 expander, both in results and saving time? I've used both, and the thing with the NS1 is you can actually dial it in very quickly because you're not having to mess about with the different parameters in the S1 expander. But in terms of actual results, they're very, very similar. Very similar indeed. You get just as good results using the expander as compared to the NS1. It's just a case of you need to think to yourself, do you actually have time to set up the expander and actually learn what expanding does, which I think is important to be able to learn what an expander actually does, how the parameters of an expander operate, and how the parameters of a gate work, for as much as you should learn all the parameters of a compressor and how that works for the same reason, really. That would be my view. Learn what the parameters do, learn how it works. That way, what if you're in a studio where you don't have access to the NS1, but you need to knock out some noise from a guitar track? Well, you know how an expander works, so you can set the expander up to do the same job. But if you're just in your studio, then obviously, yes, use the NS1. But, there are some very, very good one-knob compressors out there where you just literally pull it in, dial it up, and it compresses. Job done. The Studio One stock channel, I nearly said something rude then. Channel strip has a one-knob compressor on there. So if you're not really sure about compression, slap that on, turn the compress knob up, and select your speed. Just listen to the audio and decide which one of the fast, medium, or slow works for your audio. And then set it and forget it. Okay, the LA2A is a little bit of a set it and forget it kind of compressor. You just dial it in with the compress knob. You just turn that up, make up the gain, and you leave it, and it just does its work in the background, and it sounds great. So the LA2A is if you're not wanting, if you're wanting to go outside of the stock compressor, then the LA2A is a good place to start. Or the Klanghelm MJUC Mark 1 is just as good a place to start because it's just input, output, job done. So yeah, that'd be my view. And the good thing about the MJUC is that it's cheap. It's only 25 euros, which is stupid cheap in dollars as well. I got it for just under £20. I watched the euro and I watched it tumble and I watched the value of it go lower and lower. And I thought, great, I'm going to pick it up now because it'll be super cheap. So that's what I did, and it's gone. The euro's gone up a little bit. So watch for what the euro to the dollar does, and then go grab it when it's cheap. That'd be my opinion. Get that Klanghelm compressor in your studio. You will not regret it. Any more questions? We've got 12 people in the room now. We did have 15. So we've lost a few people. I know Rain has gone to bed because it's like 2:30 in the morning for him. It's not quite so late here. It's 1:30. I don't mind. I will be calling a night very shortly, though. So if you've got any last questions, get them in just now. And then we'll wrap it up because we've been going for about an hour and a half, more or less. So let me know what your questions are. And we'll get going here. I got Brad Brown on Facebook Messenger here. Says, still can't figure out how to ask a question during the live. It was telling me to create a channel, but then would not let me. Yeah, Brad, I will get back to you. Although you probably can't hear me saying that. Okay, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of messages from you guys telling me you can't see the screen. Do I still use the MJUC Junior? Not now that I have the full fat machine, I don't. JL, you did great. You teach well, man. Thank you, Woodbeast. I appreciate that, buddy. Peter says, songwriting streams coming back when? Yes, they are. Johnny Geib and I are in discussion about when we're going to do those, but we are going to bring them back because they were popular. And I'll tell you what, I certainly really enjoyed doing those. As much as I like talking about compressors and compression and EQ and other mixing stuff, I love talking about all of that as well. I do love talking about songwriting because I'm very passionate about songwriting, as you well know. Dooley says, +1 Woodbeast, JL is clean out of sight. You guys are just far too kind. I'm pretty sure there are people out there that do this a lot better than me, who know a lot more than me. People like Warren Hewitt. Warren is a very good friend of mine. Movie Kid is here. Good to see you, mate. Yeah, we are wrapping up very shortly. We've done some demos on compression. We've looked at the basics of compression, and we've even checked out a few compressors. That was the focus of tonight's show. And with that in mind, actually, do we all get a gold star for being behaved? Well, some of you were a little bit rude whilst I was not aware that I was not sharing my screen with you properly. And some of you talked about going to check out my bathroom. Good grief. Yeah, you'll get silver stars. You sarcastic bunch. Yes, can check it out on the replay, Movie Kid. Absolutely. Please tell us. No, I'm not going to name names. I'm not that kind of guy. But what I will say is this. If you have a suggestion for the focus for the next one, the next live stream, then let me know. And yeah, just send me a message on Facebook or email me at johnny@johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk. And oh, Brad says he's watching and can hear me. He's watching on and he's messaging me on Facebook. Brad, for you just now, you can ask your questions on Facebook, okay? But what you need to do is you need to get a YouTube channel. And you probably can't do that whilst you're watching something. I think you probably have to create a channel for yourself. If you have a Google account, you should already have such a thing. And you just need to actually make it active. I wonder if one of my friends here could get with Brad Brown on Facebook and talk him through how to get himself set up on with a YouTube channel, so he can come and actually be part of these shows, because I think he would really like to. Verk 46. Do you mix in mono, EQ and compress, etc., and how will that affect your listening? Yes, I do mix in mono. I do my EQ and my compression in mono for the most part. I do probably about 80% of my mix in mono. It's something I've done for a good few years. How does it affect my listening? Well, when you are doing stuff in mono, everything is up the middle, which means if you have, let's say you've got, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different guitars. The thing you can do when you're in stereo is you can go, I'm going to put those 2 guitars over here, and I'm going to put these 2 guitars over here. So I'm going to have 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and they're not going to get in the way of each other. Well, here's the thing. When you're listening to music casually, you're listening to your favorite record, who stands or sits in the sweet spot of that, you know, the apex of that triangle between your left and your right speaker? Nobody does that. Some people will put their music on their stereo system, and they'll be in the kitchen or they'll be in the bedroom. They'll be way out of the actual broadcast range of the speakers and out of the sweet spot of the speakers. So effectively, by the time the audio gets to their ears, it is already collapsed to mono. So if you have not properly separated the elements of your mix, let's say of those 4 guitars, then those 4 guitars are going to fight for each other, even though you've panned them out left and right to try and get them to separate. If you've not dealt with the EQ of each one of those elements, then the problem you're going to encounter is that when your music is being listened to, then in let's say the environment that I've just described, then by the time it gets to the human ear, it has already collapsed to mono. Then you're going to get some frequency masking, and you might lose one or more of those guitars in the mix. And if those are essential elements of your mix, then essentially what has happened is the essential elements of your mix have dropped out and your mix will collapse. That's what can happen. So this is why I do my EQ and compression in mono, because it means that I am forcing myself to separate each one of the elements of my mix, however many there are. There could be 5, there could be 35, there could be 105. I'm forcing myself to EQ each one of those elements and EQ the whole thing until I can hear every single element and I can clearly identify them by ear. Once I get to that point, then I flip out to stereo and everything just sounds a lot more beautiful because all of those elements are separated by EQ. And then when you pan, you find that you have a lot better separation, and actually your mix sounds a lot wider. So you gain a lot more, in my opinion, by doing that. Movie Kid says, when do you reckon you'll update your internet? Don't know. I need to do some investigation and look at different options. It'd be cool for you to be able to share screen on tutorials. Well, I have done that already, Movie Kid. I did that tonight, albeit with not brilliant success at the start, but that's because I had used the wrong sharing option. You're going to have to show how you do the top-down mixing. Still confused about it. Top-down mixing is actually relatively straightforward. To my mind, anyway, it's relatively straightforward. So let's go back to sharing my screen. Share entire screen. Back to Studio One. Let's go back to the start page and let's open up Spoken Softly again, because there are not very many elements. Now, this has not really been mixed. All I did was chuck up some EQs so that I could get this out to SoundCloud quickly. I didn't really do anything mixing wise. But basically the way top-down mixing works is, instead of starting over here with your individual elements, your individual tracks, flugelhorn, trumpets, French horns, trombones, tuba, bass, drums, piano, guitar, instead of doing that and going, I'm going to EQ over here, a little bit of compression, EQ, a little bit of compression, and that kind of thing on the individual tracks, I start over here. I start on the main out, mix bus, 2-bus, stereo bus, whatever you want to call it. This is where I start. And I start with a compressor, and I'm setting the compressor on my mix bus as follows: 2:1 ratio, 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release. The reason I have these settings, these are really, to me, these are really specific. And I've even created a preset called bus compressor with these settings, because I model these after the SSL bus compressor. I don't have it, but I know what these settings are from using an SSL. And I know that the attack profile is 30 milliseconds and the release is 100 milliseconds. And so I use these settings, essentially, because I think they're a good guide. So it's quite a slow attack and kind of a medium slow release, essentially. And then all I do is I just pull back the threshold until I see maybe a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit, quarter of a dB to 1 dB at the very most of gain reduction, and then I leave it. And then I may make up the gain by 1 dB if necessary, but generally speaking, I just leave it once I've got that. And I mix through this compressor. The binaural pan on here, I added this afterwards, and the limiter, again, I added this afterwards so that I could just get it out quickly to SoundCloud. Because I wanted people to listen to it and give me some feedback on it. So I just chucked it out there, pretty raw. And then the next place I go is to my buses here. So I have a brass bus for the brass ensemble over here, bass bus for my upright bass, drums, keys, guitar, and the flugelhorn, the solo flugelhorn over here, which comes in a little bit later on in the song, which you've not heard at that point. And this is where once I've done my bus compression over here and I've done my static mix, which would be just putting up faders until I have a happy balance and panning stuff around until I've got things where I'm just like, yep, this is sounding sweet. And everything is in its right place in the stereo spectrum. Once I've got that, then I hit this guy and I go to work over here. And what I do is I start with all the faders down to 0, and I move these up until I'm happy with the balance of them. And then I start with, if it's a song with a vocal, I will do instrumentation in reverse. So I will do I will do drums. I'll turn up the drums first, then I'll add to that the bass, and then I'll add to that guitars, and I'll add to that keys, and then any other accompanying instruments like horns or strings, they will all go next, and then I'll get to backing vocals, and then finally I will get to the vocal bus. The vocal bus will usually contain, the lead vocal bus will usually contain the lead vocal and any double that there might be to thicken the vocal, and they will get processed together. And basically I'm looking to broadly EQ each of the sections of the elements of the mix. So 4 or 5 guitars, I'm going to basically sculpt my broad guitar ensemble sound, if you will, and then I'm going to compress very lightly to glue those guitars together. And then I will move on to the next group and the next group and the next group, and so on until I've got a mix that sounds really, really awesome, epic even. And then off comes this guy back to stereo, and then I'm on to individual channels, and I will do little spot surgical EQ where I hear issues, where it's kind of necessary to pull something out, like low mids in the 300, 400 area. I will pull those out. I will do that on an individual channel basis, not on the bus basis. And that's pretty much how I work. That's my mixing strategy. So I hope that was helpful. And let's flip over to the chat. Would-be says, is money the issue for your lack of bandwidth? Not entirely. And I appreciate the fact that you said you would donate. It's not entirely a financial issue. The other issue is more to do with the fact that we live in a low-rise apartment block of apartments, obviously, on an estate which has several of these low-rise apartment blocks. The land, the land upon which these apartment blocks sit, is owned by a land management company, which in Scotland we call a housing factor. They own the land. They do not wish to have their land dug up to have cable brought into each one of their blocks. They don't want that. So we're stuck with having to use, over the copper broadband, over copper phone cable broadband. And that's what I'm stuck with. And unfortunately, what that means is that here in particular, I have pretty good download speed. The download speed is about 17 and a little bit megs a second. Upload speed is barely 1 meg a second if I'm lucky. Sometimes it can be 400 kilohertz a second, depending on the time of day. So upload is really, really slow. And that's the problem. That's why I cannot use OBS like Jonny does and like Dave does for their live streams, which is why, they don't have any issues with buffering. They don't have any issues with dropouts, frame loss, freezing. They don't have any problems with those kind of things. Unlike me, I get that all the time, and the audio quality is not so great either, because I only have 1 meg upload. However, what I'm exploring would be, so I don't know if you heard earlier, is I'm exploring the idea of having a little dongle, which you can get, which just plugs into my computer via USB, and essentially the little dongle connects to a cell phone network, which gives me access to 4G. 4G internet, which you would normally get over your smartphone. And the upload speeds for smartphones is pretty fast. I think it can be up as much as 20 megs a second, which is loads better than what I have at the moment. So I need to look at how much that's going to cost. So that's where the cost issue is. Because I need to look at, is that something I'm going to pay monthly for? Or am I going to get one on a pay-as-you-go basis and look at how much bandwidth allowance gets used up in one live stream? That's going to be the issue. So I need to look at what different companies offer, and I'll see what I find out and what I come up with, and hopefully I'll get a solution. And I appreciate you were not trying to be rude. You just want me to have better speed. Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Woodbeast. And I would like that too, very much. The ultimate solution obviously would be for us to move out of this apartment, out of this estate, and into, just a normal house on a normal street where they do actually have cable. And then I would have 50, 100 megs a second upload. that would be perfect. But we can't afford that at this particular moment. So unless somebody is generous enough to give us a deposit for a mortgage. As far as I know, most people around here don't have like hundreds of thousands of pounds to just give away. So that's where we're at. So I'm hopeful that the little dongle thing will provide me with a good solution so that I can actually live stream for a reasonable length of time and not use up all my bandwidth, so that I'm limited. You know, I don't want to kind of like end up in a situation where I've got this thing and I'm paying £10 a month for it, but you know, an hour-long live stream uses up all the bandwidth allowance, and then I'm stuck. I can't do a live stream for a month. Don't want to be in that situation either. So I am going to do a little bit of investigating and see what I can come up with, folks. And if you guys hear of anything, find out about anything that you think would be a good option for me, drop me a Facebook message or an email and let me know what you think. Okay, it is nearly 2 o'clock in the morning, so we're going to wrap up in just a second. But just to say, I've had a few of you send me their mixes to for me to critique. That is a service I am happy to provide. There is a charge for it. It's absurdly cheap. It's only £20, and basically we spend an hour together on Skype going over your mix. Now, we do not have the bandwidth problems and the upload speed issues over Skype that we have with YouTube. So doing a mix critique on Skype works pretty well. I've done one for Rainer. I did one for him just earlier this week. And Peter, I've done one for already. And £20. It's our currency, wood beast. £20. Not pounds as in LB. Pounds as in with the pound sign in front of the number 20. Like you have dollars. What the hell are dollars? I don't know. What is a dollar? See my point? Yeah, £20. I think that might be about $25, $27. I'm not really sure what the exchange rate is at the moment. But you know, Google is your friend for looking those kind of things up. Just type in dollar to pound or pound to dollar into Google, and there should be an exchange rate calculator there that you can use that will tell you what that is in dollars. Unfortunately, the exchange rate keeps on moving, so I'm not really sure. Sounds like a good beating in an alley. No. No. It's our currency. Just like yours, you know, dollars, euros, whatever. Gold doubloons. That's what I will take from now on. Prefer it to Bitcoin. So basically the way it works is you can PayPal me the £20 and send me the mix via email to johnny@johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk, and we will book a session on Skype. I'll give you my Skype ID once we've got the payment side of things all sorted out. I'll give you my Skype ID. We hook up on Skype, and Bernard is your auntie. We get that going. Okay. You want me to tell you a joke? What, really, at 2 o'clock in the morning? Are you serious? No, I'm about to enter my grouchy hour. 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when I get grumpy. I'm kidding. All right, folks, we got 13 people here. You 13 people are absolutely crazy. Yeah, Uncle JL, tell us a joke. No. I don't get paid enough for jokes. You know what I always say? I always say that comedy is my day job. And it's true, comedy is my day job. But this is not the daytime, it's 2 a.m. There you go. got to be the best get out yet, I'm sure. All right, folks, it is coming up on 2 o'clock in the morning. That would be probably, let me think, 8 o'clock Central at the moment. So the night is young for you guys, but the night is distinctly elderly and holding on to its A-frame for dear life as it crawls its way up an extremely steep hill. So there you go. I will see you folks next time on my next live stream. I think I am going to be doing a stream with Jonny this week at some point. We're going to be doing a Songwriting Simplified live stream. And of course, I'm going to be working with Dave Vignola on his live streams as well, which is really cool. I enjoy doing those with both of them. So in the meantime, guys, if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to send me a Facebook message or an email, and I'll try and answer your question or make a personalized little 4-minute video that covers whatever issue it might be. Okay, folks, so until next time, bye for now.